Chapter 2 from Mindfire. Biology and economics disappeared into a surreal fog for Leia. Mentally, she just wasn't there. It didn't help that she didn't have any friends in those classes, no one to help anchor her to reality. "Miss Hamilton," a woman's voice called. "Leia?" Leia lifted her head up and saw Professor Janice Martinez staring at her in the hallway with deep brown eyes expressing concern past strands of Martinez's blonde bangs. Professor Martinez was in her early 40s, a few inches over 5 feet tall, with shoulder-length hair. She'd returned from maternity leave at the beginning of the summer semester a month ago and was still wearing loose-fitting clothes. At the moment, she was looking at Leia like she would at one of her children. "Yes, ma'am," Leia replied. "You look like someone who could use a friend," Professor Martinez said. "Am I right? May I ask what's troubling you?" "I don't have any more classes for the day, so if you want to talk." Leia smiled. It's not that big a deal," Leia said. "I just had a misunderstanding with my boyfriend." "That must have been some misunderstanding then," Professor Martinez said. "You look like you lost something really important." "It's just, he's never been scared of me before," Leia said. "And I don't know why. I don't know what I did." Professor Martinez put her arm around Leia, and they started walking towards her office across the hallway. And they talked along the way. Not about Josh. Not yet. It was safer for Leia to complain about Professor Merrick. As they entered her office and Martinez closed the door behind them, she handed Leia a red rubber ball, small enough to fit in her fist. "This is my stress ball. Just squeeze it while you tell me what's bothering you," Martinez said. "I promise what you say will be just between us, okay?" Leia nodded and began squeezing the little red ball in her right hand as she sat down on one of the professor's wooden office chairs. The small office had yellow walls that were sparsely decorated with a clock and the professor's framed college degrees. There was an open window behind the professor's desk that was letting in a slight breeze. The desk had numerous framed photos on it, as well as the professor's laptop, an empty coffee cup, and several small stacks of paper. The professor's briefcase leaned against a half bookcase filled with historical reference books and literary works. "Don't feel too bad about Professor Merrick," Martinez said. "She's a hard one to figure out, but she's exceptional at her job. She started here a little after I did, about 3 years ago, and you should know, she pushes all her students, not just you." "I don't know why, but somehow that makes me feel better," Leia replied. "But that's not really what's bugging you," Martinez continued. "What's your boyfriend's name?" "Josh," Leia said. Leia shared her thoughts and feelings with Professor Martinez, who listened with patience born from years of practice. Leia noticed the framed pictures on Martinez's desk. A tall, muscular man with close-cropped black hair and a U.S. Army uniform. A chubby teenage girl with shoulder-length brown hair who had Martinez's eyes and smile, standing next to a younger boy who looked a lot like Martinez's husband. Next to that picture was one of her precious-looking baby daughter. The man in the picture looked very confident, completely devoted and in love, like Josh did until that awful moment this morning. That mental picture shattered Leia's emotional walls. All of the frustration and pain came pouring out at once. Leia knew she needed this. She didn't question why she trusted this professor. She just did. Eventually, Leia calmed down and finished telling Martinez what was troubling her. You were pretty mad at him for a minute there, Martinez added. Maybe you just surprised him with your intensity. Maybe, but, Leia said, closing her eyes and tensing in frustration. What was that whole thing about thinking I had a fever and the way my eyes looked? And a crack. She opened her eyes and looked at her fist. Wisps of black smoke escaped as she opened her fist, and the half-melted ball dropped to the floor. What? Leia exclaimed. Are you all right? Martinez said. Let me see your hand. Surprise flashed across the professor's face to see that Leia's hand wasn't injured, and there were no marks on it at all. It was warm, but not unusually so. I'm sorry, Leia. I've never seen any kind of ball do that. Are you sure you're all right? Yeah, Leia replied. I really don't know what happened. I'm just glad you're okay, Martinez added. That's really strange. Somehow, the ball melted because of her, even if she didn't know how or why. Still, she was glad Professor Martinez didn't look scared of her at least, unlike Josh. Leia quickly excused herself, walked out of the office, and closed the door behind her. She decided to head into work early. 5 hours later, the green eye in Skippy's Pizza flickered on the neon sign above the entranceway. Customers talked and dined in the booths or at their tables as I ran by a flock of seagulls played over the speakers. The restaurant lighting was dimmed in the customer area to provide a comfortable atmosphere, while it was well lit behind the counter and in the cooking area. Skippy's was a local Skippy's was a local restaurant, so the owner had chosen to put pictures and even flyers from local events and bands around the counter and on the walls. Tonight, Leia was at the register taking orders. She normally didn't mind this aspect of her job. It gave her a chance to talk with people as they ordered their food. But as usual, there were difficult customers. Are you saying you won't put that on my pizza? The 50-something man demanded. He was tall, very muscular, and smelled of beer and cigarettes. I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have grilled salmon as an ingredient here at Skippy's. I'll gladly substitute one of our other ingredients, Leia said. Like what? He replied, curious but not yet satisfied. Well, sir, we have pepperoni, Italian sausage, hamburger, ham, spinach, barbecue chicken, Roma tomatoes, standard pizza toppings, the man interrupted gruffly. Yes, sir, Leia continued, smiling but holding her ground. Just tell me what you'd like, and I'll have it made for you. I want grilled salmon, he shouted. Let me talk to your manager, Miss. Miffed, Leia pointed to her name tag. I am the manager, sir. Are you kidding me? You're just some kid barely out of high school. How can you be manager? Leia had had quite enough. Channeling every bit of self-confidence she could muster, she stood to her full 6-foot height and stared the man in the eyes. I have attempted to accommodate you, sir, Leia insisted, slamming her fist onto the counter next to the cash register. I have explained that we do not carry grilled salmon at this or any of our locations, and I have offered you an alternative, which you have refused. As the manager of this business, I have the right to refuse service to anyone, including you. You are preventing other customers from ordering, customers who know and understand what our regular ingredients are. So, sir, I must ask you to leave. It was then that Leia noticed that not only was the middle-aged man staring at her in fear, but so were the other 6 people near the counter and the 2 couples sitting at booths. What are you? The man said. You ain't normal. Leia turned around and saw the same frightened look in her co-worker's eyes. Then she noticed the 4 pizza cutters and 2 butcher knives suspended in mid-air around her, pointing towards the man. In one of the butcher knives, close to the left side of her head, she saw a reflection of her face. Her eyes were glowing and on fire, yet they didn't hurt. When she looked down and lifted her fist from the counter, she was further shocked to see the impression of her fist permanently embedded into the countertop and cracks spiderwebbing from the impression. A pit opened in her stomach, and she almost became nauseous. With her concentration shattered, the hovering objects fell to the floor. Then Leia collapsed to her knees, trembling with adrenaline and fear. She closed her eyes, and all the sounds in the room were drowned out by the roar of a building tidal wave in her ears. The sounds of employees and customers alike, as they ran out of the building, were barely heard. Sometime later, she wasn't sure how long, Leia recovered her composure. Her senses relented, and most of her strength returned. Leia looked up and saw that she was alone. "Leave, now," a female voice said. Leia didn't hear it with her ears. It seemed to be in her head. "The police have been called. You have to get out of there, now." The voice was familiar, though Leia couldn't identify who it was. But clearly, whoever spoke to her was worried about her. Leia stood up and exited the back door of the restaurant. Hearing sirens a few blocks away, she started running down back alleyways to avoid being seen out on the street. "It'll be all right," a woman's voice soothed in Leia's head, "but you should get home. Only tell your parents. They'll understand." Am I nuts? Is that it? Maybe Josh was right. I have a fever and I'm hallucinating. "I wish that were true, girl," the voice added. "But sometimes the truth is harsher and more difficult to deal with." "Who are you?" "Someone with abilities like you," the voice said. "I want to help you." "Why? Everyone else is scared of me. Are you just interested in me because I have powers? Why are you doing this?" "You mean much more to me than your powers, Leia Hamilton. I'll explain everything someday. I promise." Still somewhat disoriented, Leia began to cry, feeling overwhelmed as it dawned on her what had happened. There was so much she still didn't understand. "They fear you because you have power," the voice continued after a short pause. "It separates you from them. It makes you better than them, and they know it." "I'm not better than anyone." "Really?" the voice said, ripe with sarcasm. "You could have turned that drunkard into a torch, or impaled everyone in there with sharp objects. You could have crushed their skulls." "Shut up," Leia thought, agonized by the callous imagery. "I'd never do that." The voice laughed. "I was like you once," the voice added. "Young, hopelessly naive and idealistic. I hope you can maintain that illusion. I had to learn the hard way." "Who are you?" The voice went silent as Leia reached her home and went inside. And that is the end of chapter 2.